Hello and welcome back to another wet day in the north. It is absolutely throwing it down. Not quite typical northern style, more sort of tropical thunderstorm style. So yeah, I'm a bit damp, but fortunately I'll be putting my scruffs on any minute. I want to say two priorities for today, but there's so many things I want to do. Full enthusiasm back today. Number one is fixing the cooling system. Lots of bubbles, lots of air getting trapped, not enough cooling on particularly charging. So I've got a new part to go in to fix that and remove that dreadful filler neck. Second thing is tuning. I've done some tuning off camera. It's not right yet, but some definite pointers of which direction to go in to get more power out of this machine. And already some progress. So problems with our cooling loop. This thing was leaking, and that's going straight in the bin. And I think partly as a result, our pump was sometimes getting starved of water, so air was getting into the system. It couldn't suck water up from the radiator because there was too much air in there. I think this is the problem. More experimentation needed. Anyway, to solve this, I'm going to move the pump to here. It's going to sit there and then come in at a right angle into here and then come off in this direction back to a new reservoir that's going to sit where the pump was. Kind of perfect reservoir I found online, which will sit there. It will be the high point, or the top will be the high point, so we should be able to bleed the system pretty effectively and burp the system pretty effectively, because it will be just a bit higher than the cooling plate for the inverter. And yeah, and we shouldn't have any leaks anymore, which should allow us to get rid of all of that air. So fingers crossed. What I don't know is whether we're still going to have issues drawing water up. So with this pump drawing water through the reservoir, through the charger from the radiator. That's a possibility. If that is the case, we might put a second pump in here, effectively a lift pump, to pull water up to the right level and into the reservoir through the charger and keep the charger cool, and then this one drives it through the rest of the system. But we shall see. Well, that's not a good sign for a start. That shows you how much it's leaking. Driving largely without cooling. In the bin. I'm hoping this is going to fit in this space here. Okay, so water is making it up to the pump at least. That's good news. All the wires fit. Oh, I might have to extend the cables, which is annoying. Or just move the earth for the pump. Right, this is going to get fiddly. Fiddly, as I suspected, but it's in. So now we've got our reservoir there. We'll need a little bracket, probably coming off here, just to hold that. Maybe 3D print something. Combination of cable ties and 3D printing, or could just put a little, wrap of steel around it or something. It's not really going anywhere, but I don't really want it bouncing around and potentially bouncing off these wires. So I'll secure that. Other end motors in likewise needs a proper bracket, but some big cable ties for now just to keep it away from the ABS pump. And that's all in. All the connections are cable tied up, and I've also run a pipe from the sort of the top little outlet, or little overflow, whatever you want to call it, from the radiator up to here. So completely sealing the system now. I'm much more happy with that, much more confident that that's going to work. Only thing now is to wire up the pump. I broke one of the earth here, the earth for the charger while routing this pipe, so I need to reconnect that, and I need to run an earth over here. I'm really wishing I'd included a bunch of earth points on this frame when I made it. Next time I make something like this, I'm going to make lots of earth points on it. And yeah, at some point I need to take this out, because I need to cut this off as well. So at some point I'll take that out, cut that off, maybe add some earth points and get the whole thing powder coated. But that's a job for another day. Got the electrics hooked up, and there's a result I was not expecting. So there's no suction to pull this through. This is purely the pressure created by this pump going through the inverter, through the motor, through the radiator, and still creating enough pressure to force water along the smaller pipe. That's kind of bonkers. I'm hoping that when the lid's on and sealed, it's pulling it, more of it through here instead. It's clearly got to be pulling some through here, or is it? Yeah, it must be. But there's enough pressure to force some through there as well. So either way, it seems to be working well now. Let's see, we'll have to see when we charge what sort of cooling the charger's getting, whether we need to move things around again. But certainly the inverter charging now is massively improved, and it's not tripping out, and it's not leaking when the lid's on properly. There we go. So still a bit of air to get out, and I'll obviously drain it and swap it for proper coolant at some point once we know it's working fine. But much happier with that. That's an awful lot better. Time for some tuning. Now that I've ticked a bunch of stuff off the list, I've rearranged the whiteboard to give me a bit more space for new items. So everything else has been shunted over here. Still a lot to do on the 300, or the Spider, as I'm increasingly going to call it. But a few things to do on tuning. So once you've got your electric motor running with open inverter, how do you tune it? This is not an expert's guide. I am by no means an expert, but these are the things I have to do. The first one might seem really strange, but it's actually to check you've got your phase connections the right way round. Right way round? Right way round. When I was setting up the motor, I mucked around with the order of the phase connections between the inverter and the motor a few times, until when the motor was set to forwards, the wheel spun forwards when I applied throttle or manual current. But at one point while I was doing that, the motor span backwards, and so I swapped the phase connections round. I actually think I probably had it the right way round at this point, and I had sync offset wrong. Now sync offset, again, this is probably wrong because this is my idiot understanding, but it's the difference between where the motor is and where the inverter thinks the motor is. And clearly if it's out of sync between the two, you're going to get the phases firing at the wrong time, maybe even the motor spinning backwards. So actually if you put your sync offset 180 degrees out from where it should be, and you can basically reverse the direction of the motor. Now I've been playing with sync offset off camera, went from 0 on the rear motor on the Outlander to 32,700-ish, about halfway up the full range of possibilities. And suddenly I can go forwards, albeit slightly juddery, but also I can go reverse with the the direction switch. I've never been able to do that on this car before, which makes me think I probably had my phase connections the wrong way round, or my sync offset wrong with the old motor, which is why perhaps one of the explanations why Jamie was getting more power than me with the same motor, same inverter, and not much more voltage on his part. So that's made a big difference. Still some tuning to do, and actually I think I'm going to try going back to the old orientation of the phase connections. I can't remember which way around it was. I didn't mark them up well enough, so I might have to do some experimentation. But I'm going to jack the back of the car up and go back to a different orientation of the phase connections, because at the moment forward's a bit juddery, but backwards seems to be really smooth and quite powerful. If I can flip that around, reverse the sync offset back to where it was, I'm hoping I can still reverse with the electric switch, but I can take off forwards with more torque. You can play with throttle curve, literally the amount of current that the inverter delivers for every percentage of throttle travel. I've already tweaked that up a bit in this car. I've got it much higher than I had it in the old one. I had it at 3.8, 3.81 with the old smaller motor. I've now got it running at 4.5 in here, and that was with the cooling not working very well. I'm hopeful that with better inverter cooling I can maybe tweak that up a little bit more. And then you've got sync advance. Clearly the faster the motor's spinning, potentially the greater the offset between where the motor is and where the inverter thinks it is. And so sync advance allows you to vary sync offset by a percentage, I think it's a percentage, as the motor spins faster. So the higher frequency, the greater the offset, in order for the inverter to be able to keep up and keep firing those phases at the appropriate moment. That's probably making people who are real experts in this cry, but that's as much of an understanding as I've got to try tuning this motor now. As you can see, I've exposed the screws holding in the phase connections, and I've just stuck some tape around a couple of them so that I can identify one from the other in case I let them go and muck up. Now in theory there's obviously multiple permutations for how these can be ordered, but I suspect the one I want, and the one I'm going to start by testing, is reversing 1 and 3. So keeping 2 in the middle, keeping 2 where it is, so the one without any tape on it where it is, swapping the black and orange taped up ones over, and we'll see where we go from there. Well, this is interesting. So I swapped 1 and 3 over and started the car up. And as soon as when you press the throttle, no movement, and you can hear it trip out. Let's have a look at the error on there on Open Inverter. So logged into Open Inverter, and you can see that the last error there was overcurrent. So that's clearly not right. You'll have to forgive my atrocious handwriting, just to show that I'm actually taking notes on all of these. So I started off with 1, 2, 3, that's what I drove here with. Then tried 3, 2, 1. No movement, inverter trip on throttle, tried sync offset 0 and 32763. Now trying 132 to see how that works. Clearly it was 132 that I remember working in quite lively fashion when I was setting it up before. Watch this. So foot on throttle, little bit of throttle. Now that's with sync offset 0, that's with the direction switch set to forward, and it's obviously going in reverse. So if we switch the sync offset to 32763, do we now get forward motion with that sort of liveliness, and can we still do reverse? That's the question. Or do we do a little test with it with sync offset 0 before we start mucking around with putting it in the middle somewhere? I mean, after all, it's only a switch. Does it matter if it's in reverse? Now, this won't be a long test because I don't have enough charge to go zooming out. Oh, hello, what have I hit? Because I don't have enough charge to go zooming around everywhere. But should be able to. Oh, let's get the roof down. It's not raining anymore. Should be able to get a sense of how it's performing. It's better. So yeah, a little bit juddery in reverse, which is kind of what I was expecting. Roller shutters aren't working. There we go. Keep it nice and secure. Ooh. Okay, trip out. Ha. Okay, let's restart. That was my fault because I really put my foot down. To be a bit more gentle. Need some sunnies. Okay, a bit juddery forward as well. So some tuning needed. Maybe it does need to go to sync offset. Oh yeah, too juddery to drive. Yeah. That sync offset's clearly not right. Back to the garage. I actually don't need to go back to the garage because I've got my laptop. Let's log into the inverter. God knows what these bin men think. There we go. So save parameters. So I'll set sync offset to 32763. Restart. When traffic clears, we'll give that another try. Must remember to switch direction. In theory. That's interesting. Huh. Okay, I've got reverse, but no forward at all. Interesting. Okay, back to the garage. Had a quick chat with the Brains Trust, and verdict is try experimenting with sync offset. So I'm going to revert the firmware back to the version where I can do some manual tuning and do some manual tuning. I won't show all that again. It's not very exciting. But we'll see what we get to. When you're playing with the open inverter firmware, particularly when you're playing with it in your garage, a long way from your home, or a reasonable distance anyway, the one thing you really don't want to see is the spinny wheel of death. To fill you in, I couldn't get the inverter to go into manual run mode. So I tried downgrading the firmware progressively through 4.96. So I started on 5.14, down to 4.96, which is what I think I used last time for tuning. That didn't work, went down to 4.94, that didn't work. Tried to go down to 4.90 and lost my Wi-Fi connection halfway through an upload. I now have no access to parameters, which means the open inverter board is only temporarily, but temporarily balked nonetheless. Given that the last state of tune was pretty much undrivable, well, at least I get my bike home now. So I need my programming dongle. I need to take the whole inverter apart in order to get to the open inverter board. I don't have external access to the reset switch. So yeah, not ideal really. Not where I wanted to finish this video. So much promise at that point when I set off. It felt really lively. It felt like I was going to have a lot more power. But no. So the car can stay here. Probably for a couple of days till I can get back here, maybe Friday. And yeah, that's going to be unfortunately the end of this video. What arrives on 4 wheels goes home on 2 wheels. It's not a riddle, it's just me. Not a lot I can do. I've not got the right bits here in order to reprogram the board to restore the firmware to where it should be. So I'm going to have to leave the car here for today and cycle back. Fortunately, my bike is here and needed to go home anyway. So that's where I'll have to leave this video. I hope you enjoyed my abject failure. Seems to be always 2 steps forward, or even 1.5, frankly. 1 step back on this project. But I felt like I made some progress. I felt like I got a better understanding of what's going on. Got a sense that maybe there is some more power to be had there. It's just a question of getting those parameters right and not buggering up the firmware. So I'll be back as usual, videos every Monday and Thursday. If you like this stuff, please do like and subscribe, share it around, let me know what you think. Any tips, recommendations, always welcome. See you on the next one. Bye bye.